25-year-old Leonid Toptunov stands in the main control room of reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It's 1:23 am. The controls indicate that generator power is increasing rapidly. What was supposed to be routine safety test is now becoming extremely dangerous. The instruction from his supervisor is clear.
Вимкніть реактор! Повторюю, вимкніть реактор!
But it was already too late. The reactor was too unstable to be safely switched off. The decision to press the button would trigger the biggest nuclear catastrophe in history, with over 100,000 people permanently evacuated from their homes and effects felt across all Europe. Located 65 miles north of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant sat in one of the Soviet Union's most important regions. The plant's 4 reactors were a source of pride for Soviets, the symbol of their technological power and nuclear ambitions. The plant provided electricity to millions of citizens and was considered one of the most important industrial facilities in Ukraine. On April 26, 1986, everything was about to change. Reactor crew at Chernobyl begins preparing for what seemed like a straightforward test. They wanted to simulate cooling the reactor in case of a loss of a main power supply. This wasn't anything new. The same test had been attempted 3 times at Chernobyl in recent years. The first 2 attempts showed that the turbine generator power was insufficient, and the third yielded no results due to problem with recording equipment. Workers started reducing the reactor's power from its normal 3200 megawatts to 700. The test was scheduled for the day shift at 2 p.m. Everything was going according to the plan. Suddenly, the nearby power plant unexpectedly went offline. The Kiev electrical grid controller requested Chernobyl to delay the test to meet the electricity demand. The day shift had already carried out most required procedures. Critically, the emergency cooling system had been shut off as a part of test procedure and was left disabled despite the delay. Leonid Toptunov has just arrived at Chernobyl power plant. He is the part of the night shift which wasn't supposed to conduct the test. By the time the experiment was allowed to continue, the experienced day shift, together with specialized team of electrical engineers, had gone home. The less experienced night shift now faces a complex test with limited time to prepare. Together with Leonid is his direct boss, Aleksandr Akimov, and Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chef engineer at the Chernobyl station. Dyatlov is the man in charge this night. He has 14-year experience working on naval reactors in the Soviet Union. It made him one of the 3 most senior managers at the Chernobyl station. Dyatlov is known to work 6 or 7 days a week for long shifts while priding himself on his knowledge of reactor systems. He is also known as an unforgiving boss who often curses at staff who don't follow his orders to the letter. Almost immediately after he took a lead of the shift, things started going wrong. The reactor power suddenly dropped to only 30 megawatts, far below the 700 needed for the test. This happened because of the reactor poisoning, a buildup of xenon gas that absorbs neutrons and reduces power. Dyatlov decided to increase power by pulling out nearly all the control rods that are meant to slow the nuclear reaction. They managed to get the power back up to 200 megawatts, and the reactor was now extremely unstable. This was still far below required 700 megawatts, but they decided to continue the test anyway. Later investigations would reveal that personnel had disconnected multiple technical protection systems and knowingly ignored regulations to speed up test completion, unaware of how severe consequences could become. With most control rods removed, the reactor had almost no safety margin. Extra water pumps were turned on, which made it even more unstable. The reactor design had a fatal flaw. When water turned to steam, it actually increased the nuclear reaction instead of slowing it down. And it was now like a bomb waiting to go off. Anatoly Dyatlov is confident that everything they had done poses no threat to reactor stability. Unfortunately, the second most important man in the room, Aleksandr Akimov, also didn't notice any problems. He is a 33-year-old Soviet engineer on duty as the shift supervisor and Leonid's direct boss. Alexander and Leonid has become good friends during their work at Chernobyl Reactor. They regularly spend their free time together by going fishing and engaging in other activities. Leonid always wanted an older brother, and Akimov provided just that. This night, the decisions of both men would lead to fatal consequences. Despite the dangerous conditions, the test proceeded. Steam to the turbines was cut off, causing water flow to decrease. Less water meant more steam bubbles, which made the nuclear reaction speed up even more. The reactor began spiraling out of control. Finally, the staff began noticing something was going very wrong. Leonid Toptunov, who had only worked independently as a senior reactor control engineer for 3 months, is now operating the reactor controls. He is observing all the controls going crazy and is tasked with the ultimate measure to save the situation: shut down the reactor. The emergency shutdown button, designed to insert all control rods and save the reactor, would ironically cause the explosion. After the accident, one of Leonid's friends mentioned that during his studies of the reactor documentation, Leonid has told him that control rods may, in certain circumstances, accelerate rather than slow the reaction. If this thought had crossed his mind at the time of pressing the button, he would have been right to listen to it. This was the exact flaw in the reactor's design. But unfortunately, he stuck to following his boss' orders, unaware of the severity of the situation. Within seconds, the reactor power jumped to 30,000 megawatts, 10 times the normal. Steam pressure blew apart the reactor core and blasted the 1,000-ton concrete lid through the roof. About 2 seconds later, an even more powerful explosion scattered burning radioactive material across the area. At first, the crew thought the explosion was caused by the problem with hydrogen or turbine, not by destroyed reactor. Dyatlov remained in denial, insisting the reactor was intact and ordering water to be pumped into what was now an exposed, burning nuclear core. Akimov stayed at his post as well, trying to save what he believed was a damaged but recoverable reactor. He did not believe the core was destroyed for hours. Leonid was dismissed with non-essential personnel but returned out of a sense of responsibility. This decision has put his life at stake. All 3 men were unknowingly exposing themselves to lethal doses of radiation while trying to save the reactor that could no longer be repaired. Leonid and Alexander tried to manually open water valves in an attempt to increase water supply to the reactor, during which they began to experience symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. They were found by other workers and taken to the hospital. Eventually, Dyatlov left the control room to evaluate the situation. He began to feel weak and started vomiting. Finally, Finally, he came to realization of what happened and left for the administration building to report to plant's director. A series of unbelievable coincidences has led to Chernobyl disaster. Though Dyatlov, Akimov and Toptunov were hugely responsible, the decisions they made were only fatal because of the exact conditions they faced. If the day shift had completed the test as planned, and if the emergency cooling system hadn't been left disabled, and if the experienced engineers had been there to guide the process, 3 men might have simply gone home after completing another routine night shift.